The Asian sense of humour can seem cheesy to Westerners, and the Western sense of humour can seem flat and dry to Asians. I love Dylan Moran, but he would bomb in rural Kerala. They would rather watch a sketch about a magical lungi than hear a monologue on cake. If you're not familiar with a lungi, it's an outfit that allows you to simultaneously look like you're accounting and panning for gold. Having grown up between the two communities, Asia and the West, let's work out how they became so different at laughing. The Western sense of humour has two main influences. Shakespeare gave us our comic tools, such as misunderstanding. These then spread throughout the culture. Britain once misunderstood India as being East Newcastle, comically realising 200 years later in the hilarious tale Gandhi. But Shakespeare did more than just give us comedic devices. He made us self-obsessed. Before that, the gods were the stars of our stories, people like Zeus and Jesus. Shakespeare made us focus on our own psychology, our temptations, jealousy, romance, schemes, and to see the comedy and drama in all of that. And as Westerners, we've loved talking about our inner world ever since. After they hurt themselves, Western parents will often say to their kids, "How are you feeling?" Asian parents will say, "You've put on weight," or "You look old." There's also a major philosophical difference between the West and Asia. Shakespeare captured the Western view of human life. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women mere players. The Buddhist version, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women more stage. Sounds like you had a stroke mid-sentence, but we'll get to religion in just a mo. The second thing that shaped the Western humour is the Russians. If you want an honest opinion about anything, ask a mate who lives on a tundra. There's no time for BS when you're one wrong turn away from becoming human gelato. And in the 1800s, the Russians gave us the most honest writing on how bad human life can really be. No more lying or evading. Tolstoy exposed the worst in human society, and Dostoevsky the worst in human psychology. And as a culture, we haven't stopped talking that way since. The playwright Chekhov continued that honesty on stage and spread to the rest of Europe and found a brutal outlet of expression in theatre's fetal alcohol love child, stand-up comedy. Hicks, Pryor, Carlin, Dave Chappelle all have that human-centric focus of Shakespeare and the cynical lens of the Russians applied to their own time and place. So the Western sense of humour is filled with irony, satire, black observations, broken social taboos. It's highly irreverent. Nietzsche declared God dead in 1882, before even having to see World War I. There was just some steam engines and butterscotch lollies, but that was enough for the wussy poet. With nothing left to revere, Westerners don't hold back as humorists. But if there is one people who do hold back, it's Asians. So let's see how their humour is different. In this video, we'll focus on India and China. In India, comedy has formed over centuries within a social soup made up of Hinduism, Buddhism, and extended families. Hinduism and Buddhism discouraged you from reveling in that navel-gazing psychological world loved by Shakespeare, and encouraged you to transcend that world in deep states of meditation and spiritual bliss. And extended families pressured you to not dishonour them with your sex jokes during Pongal festival. So within these pressures, a comedy emerged in the villages that was more driven by slapstick, puns, caricatures, and things that don't cause you to self-obsess or cause massive offence. There were brief moments of satire though. For instance, you know people are quite stereotypical, and when they hear the word Tamil, they think of what? That's right, the Tamil Sangam literature. The Tamil people also produced a highly organised militant movement in Sri Lanka known as the Tamil Tigers, but we'll cover that in a future video. There was one Tamil Sangam story where the poet, Kalamegam, was wandering through a village, thirsty. He asked to buy some buttermilk off a cowherdess in fact, and he found it to be very diluted. He then wrote a satirical poem talking about how when water is in the sky, it is termed a cloud, then as water when it reaches the earth, then as buttermilk when it reaches the hands of cowherdesses. Boom! Speaking truth to powerful shepherds. The main style of comedy in India, especially the north, for many centuries, was nautanki, or as Western audiences would say, no thank you. These were 8-hour-long plays that would kick off at 10 p.m. and attract crowds of 10 to 15,000 people. The whole village would get involved, so the plays had to be pretty inclusive. They'd have comedy skits, songs, and often deal with social issues of the day. Modern day nautanki has dealt with issues like Indian men coming back to India to marry, getting a dowry, and then abandoning their wives to go back to their American girlfriend. Now China. In Chinese culture, people care more about losing face than Clarice in Silence of the Lambs, and it can be hard to be funny when you're desperately trying to build harmony. How many hilarious quotes came out of South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission? We just got a whole lot of pics like this. So the fear of losing face or causing public shame had a chilling effect on some of the most socially brutal comedy. But, like in India with Hinduism, the Chinese worked around it to develop their own comedy styles that did fit within their culture. Crosstalk was huge. The word crosstalk comes from a concept in electrical engineering, which is the most respected type of metaphor in Asian culture. It's when signals interfere with each other. In crosstalk comedy, two characters misunderstand each other, leading to fast-paced hilarity. It's like Abbott and Costello, but several hundred years later during the Qing dynasty. Skits dealing with social themes were also popular, and traditional Chinese comedy seems to revel in absurdity, similar to Monty Python. Silliness is fun, but not that offensive or socially threatening. I asked my Chinese comedian friend from Beijing to compare Chinese and Western humour. This is what he said. So back to our question, why do Western audiences find Asian comedy cheesy? I think it comes down to the influence of stand-up comedy. Stand-up seems to change a society's sense of humour, emerging out of American vaudeville in dense, thrilling, seedy bars. It gave us a humour that was rough, fast-paced, and amoral. America and the West has been stewing in that type of humour for 100 years. Asia for just 15 years. One is the comedy of the inner city, the other is the comedy of the village. What feels like cheesiness is just the distance between the two. Thanks for listening in. If you'd like to hear more videos about Asian culture, the ins and outs, the ugly and the beautiful of Asian society, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.